There's something haunting about ruins, the way they stand as silent witnesses to a past we can only piece together. But what if some ruins weren't meant to be found at all? What if they were designed to vanish, leaving behind nothing but whispers? Picture this: you're deep in a forgotten jungle, your boots sinking into damp earth as you push through tangled vines. Suddenly you see it, a crumbling wall, its edges softened by centuries of rain and wind. But here's the twist: this wall wasn't worn down by time, it was built to dissolve. This isn't just another ancient mystery. This is the story of a civilization that mastered the art of disappearance, a people who chose oblivion over immortality. Why would an entire culture go to such lengths to erase itself? What could be so dangerous, so sacred, or so secret that they'd rather vanish than be remembered? These aren't just questions for historians, they're riddles that tug at something deeper in all of us. After all, isn't the fear of being forgotten one of humanity's oldest nightmares? Yet here, hidden in the shadows of history, lies a society that did the unthinkable. They didn't just fade away, they engineered their own vanishing act. Their temples were designed to collapse, their cities built to be swallowed by the earth, and the few clues they left behind, they feel like deliberate breadcrumbs, as if they're testing whether anyone is clever enough to follow. This isn't just a tale of lost cities or buried treasure. It's a mirror held up to our own obsession with legacy. Why do we carve our names into stone, build monuments to outlast us, and cling to the hope that future generations will remember? The ruins we're about to explore turn that instinct upside down. They whisper of a different philosophy, one where some truths are too powerful to be preserved, where silence is the ultimate safeguard. So join me as we step into the footsteps of those who walked away from history's spotlight. By the end of this journey, you might just wonder, are there some stories that were never meant to be told? Imagine living in a world where your greatest achievement wasn't a towering monument or an empire that spanned centuries, but the ability to leave no trace at all. This is the paradox at the heart of these ruins. While most ancient civilizations raced to etch their names into eternity, a select few did the opposite. They built with materials meant to decay, chose locations that nature would reclaim, and left behind just enough to tease, but never enough to fully understand. Take the Maya, for example. Their grand cities like Tikal or Palenque weren't merely abandoned. The way their structures were positioned, the way certain chambers were sealed, it all suggests a meticulous unraveling, as if they were dismantling their own legacy piece by piece. Then there's Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple, deliberately buried under thousands of tons of earth around 8000 BCE. Why go to such lengths to hide something so monumental? One theory points to secrecy, a protective measure for sacred knowledge or technologies too advanced for their time. Another suggests a cultural taboo against permanence, a belief that nothing should outlive its purpose. But the most haunting possibility, that these societies understood something we're only beginning to grasp, that survival sometimes means disappearing. In an era of climate shifts, invading armies, or even celestial threats, the smartest move might have been to leave no target at all. The deeper we dig, the more these ruins feel like riddles wrapped in enigmas. They challenge our obsession with legacy, forcing us to ask, is immortality really the ultimate goal? Or could there be wisdom in knowing when to let go? The answers won't be found in grand inscriptions or treasure-filled tombs. They're hidden in the quiet spaces between the stones, in the way a staircase ends abruptly or a mural fades just before revealing its secret. These aren't accidents of time, they're the fingerprints of a people who mastered the art of vanishing. And perhaps that's their final lesson, that some truths aren't meant to be carved in stone, but carried away on the wind. The materials these civilizations left behind speak louder than any inscription. While most ancient builders sought the hardest stones, granite, marble, basalt, these vanishing cultures made choices that defy logic. In Cambodia's jungle, temples were constructed with a soft sandstone that crumbles at the touch of humidity, their intricate carvings dissolving like sugar in rain. Along the coast of Peru, adobe bricks were mixed with salt, accelerating erosion so the walls would melt back into the earth. Even metalwork tells the same story. Tools and ornaments found in these ruins are often made of alloys designed to corrode, as if their creators wanted them to return to the soil without a trace. But here's what's fascinating: this wasn't carelessness, it was precision. Modern engineers have reverse-engineered some of these materials and found something startling: their degradation follows predictable patterns. Take the mortar used in certain Mayan structures. Instead of lime, which hardens over time, they used organic compounds that weaken with exposure. The result: walls that collapse inward after centuries, burying their contents neatly like a self-sealing tomb. And it wasn't just about decay. Some materials were chosen for how they'd interact with their environment. In Turkey's Derinkuyu, an entire underground city was carved from volcanic tuff, a rock soft enough to sculpt but sturdy enough to last just long enough to serve its purpose before slowly compacting under its own weight. The artifacts left behind deepen the mystery. Unlike typical archaeological sites, where objects are scattered by time or looters, these ruins often contain carefully arranged items, tools stacked in corners, pottery placed in geometric patterns, even personal belongings laid out as if for a ritual. But there's a catch. None of these objects were meant to endure. Textiles woven from plant fibers that disintegrate within decades, wooden tablets carved with messages that fade as the wood warps, even food stores buried in ways that guarantee they'd fossilize rather than remain edible. Every choice feels intentional, like a civilization meticulously editing its own history. Perhaps the most telling clue lies in what isn't there. Most ancient sites contain records, kings' lists, tax rolls, epic poems etched into clay. But in these vanishing ruins, writing is rare, and when it appears, it's often cryptic. Symbols etched into surfaces destined to erode, or codes embedded in architecture that only reveal themselves under specific conditions, like sunlight at a certain angle or after a particular rainfall. It's as if they wanted their secrets to be found, but only by those willing to listen closely, to piece together whispers before they fade forever. The message is clear: some knowledge isn't meant for everyone. Some truths are too fragile to outlast their keepers. Consider a city where every house was made of paper, not as a sign of poverty, but as a deliberate choice, a statement that nothing should outlive its usefulness. This isn't just hypothetical. Across history, cultures have turned away from permanence, embracing materials that surrender to time. The Nabateans, famed for Petra's towering stone facades, left no trace of their daily lives. No crumbling homes, no marketplaces, just those monumental tombs carved into cliffs. Archaeologists once assumed they were nomads, but what if the truth is stranger? What if their houses were woven from reeds or built with timber meant to rot, leaving behind only what they wanted us to find? Then there's Japan's Ai's Grand Shrine, a masterpiece of wooden architecture torn down and rebuilt identically every 20 years for over a millennium. This isn't preservation, it's reinvention. The shrine's sacred posts are cut from trees planted centuries ago for this very purpose, a cycle where decay isn't failure but fulfillment. The Shinto belief in Tokawaka, eternal renewal, means the shrine never ages, yet never lasts. It's a living paradox, a monument to impermanence that has endured longer than most stone cathedrals. But why go to such lengths? The answer lies in the materials themselves. Wood breathes, mud returns to the earth, salt dissolves. These aren't just practical choices, they're philosophical ones. In Mesoamerica, the Purépecha people built pyramids from packed earth, knowing rain would eventually smooth them back into hills. In Mongolia, the ancient Xiongnu constructed entire palaces from felt and leather, leaving no footprint when they migrated. These civilizations understood something profound, that materials carry meaning. A stone temple screams, "Remember me," but a bamboo village whispers, "Let me go." The most striking examples come from the deserts, where scarcity makes every material choice a revelation. The Thar Desert's bungas, circular huts made of woven grass and clay, stand for generations, yet when abandoned, they melt into the landscape within years. No rubble, no debris, just earth reclaiming earth. Contrast this with Egypt's pyramids, built to defy time, and the difference becomes clear. One culture sought eternity, the others embraced transience as a kind of wisdom. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in what these societies didn't build. No grand statues of kings, no victory arches celebrating conquests. Instead, they left gaps in the archaeological record like carefully placed silences in a poem. Their legacy isn't in what survived, but in the elegance of what disappeared. When a civilization chooses to vanish, every crumbling wall becomes a question, not how did this fall? But why did they let it? The answer might just rewrite our understanding of what it means to be remembered. There's a profound difference between being forgotten and choosing to disappear. For these vanishing civilizations, time wasn't a straight line to outlast, it was a circle to step out of. Take the Indus Valley, where sprawling cities like Mohenjo-Daro were abandoned with almost eerie precision. No signs of war, no evidence of famine, just empty streets and silent walls. But the Vedic texts from the same region speak of pralaya, cycles where the universe dissolves itself to begin anew. What if those empty streets weren't a tragedy, but a ceremony? A deliberate unraveling, like a sand mandala swept away after its completion. The Dogon people of Mali carry a similar thread in their oral traditions. They describe their ancestors as Nomo, beings who descended from the stars and later returned, leaving behind only cryptic symbols carved into cliffs. Their ruins aren't just abandoned villages, they're landing sites, doorways. Modern archaeologists often dismiss these stories as myth, but what if they're missing the point? When a culture builds with the intent to vanish, their ruins aren't failures of preservation. They're invitations to look beyond the material, to question whether disappearance might be the highest form of preservation. Eastern philosophies offer a striking parallel. In Japan, the concept of mono, no aware, the bittersweet beauty of impermanence, shapes everything from cherry blossom festivals to tea ceremonies. The petals fall precisely because they're fleeting. Could the architects of these vanishing ruins have shared this wisdom? The Maya's sacred Popol Vuh describes gods who created humans from corn, a material meant to decay and nourish new life. Their pyramids, slowly sinking into the jungle, mirror this cycle, not monuments to eternity, but vessels for transformation. Even Plato's Atlantis, often dismissed as pure fiction, takes on new meaning in this light. The story describes an advanced civilization that sank beneath the waves in a single day. But what if that sinking wasn't a punishment, as Plato framed it, but an achievement? A people who mastered the ultimate act of control, not over nature, but over their own legacy. The most haunting evidence lies in the patterns. From Göbekli Tepe's burial to Cambodia's dissolving temples, these sites cluster around celestial alignments tied to rebirth myths. Their builders didn't just predict their own end, they choreographed it. This leaves us with a radical possibility that these cultures didn't just vanish, they graduated. Like students burning their notes after an exam, they left behind just enough to prove they were here, but not enough to chain them to history. The question isn't whether they succeeded in disappearing, but whether we've failed to understand what disappearance meant to them. Their ruins whisper that immortality isn't in stone, but in the moment when the last trace dissolves and the story begins again. Deep in the jungles of Guatemala, the Maya city of Tikal rises like a green cathedral, its temples piercing the canopy. Yet climb those weathered steps, and you'll find something peculiar. The altars aren't shattered by invaders but carefully disassembled, their stones stacked almost reverently. This wasn't collapse, it was closure. Across the Maya world, from Palenque to Calakmul, archaeologists uncover the same pattern. Doors sealed with rubble, ceremonial objects arranged in precise formations, even staircases dismantled block by block. These aren't the scars of a civilization in chaos, they're the fingerprints of a people methodically packing up their own history. Their glyphs tell a story even more startling. Carved into stelae and temple walls, the Maya didn't prophesy their downfall, they scheduled it. The long count calendar's so-called end date in the 13th Bacton around the year 2012 in our calendar wasn't an apocalypse but a pivot point. Recent decipherments reveal phrases like the binding up of the years, suggesting they saw their departure as natural as seasons changing. Imagine a culture so attuned to time's rhythms that leaving wasn't defeat, but deference to some greater cycle. But here's what chills the bones: they took their genius with them. The Maya mastered astronomy to track Venus with pinpoint accuracy, devised a mathematical concept of 0 centuries before Europe, and engineered water systems rivaling modern cities. Yet no grand libraries survived, no Rosetta Stone to fully unlock their glyphs. Just fragments like they wanted us to glimpse their brilliance but never fully grasp it. One theory points to the Dresden Codex, a surviving Maya text filled with eclipse tables so precise they could predict celestial events millennia ahead. Was this knowledge too dangerous to leave intact? Among their last glyphs, a recurring symbol appears, Chab, meaning to erase, not as an act of defeat but of intention. The most haunting clue lies in what they did leave behind: traps. At Kapan, excavators found a royal tomb sealed under tons of rubble, its entrance booby trapped with stacked stones poised to collapse. In El Mirador, a ceremonial platform conceals a narrow tunnel leading to a chamber filled with shattered jade, a treasure deliberately destroyed. These aren't accidents. They feel like tests, as if the Maya were filtering who could access their secrets. Only those patient enough to dig without greed, or wise enough to recognize a warning, would uncover the truth that some doors were meant to stay closed. Perhaps their greatest lesson isn't in what they built, but in what they refused to preserve. While empires like Rome shouted their triumphs into eternity, the Maya whispered, then fell silent. Their ruins aren't just abandoned cities, they're mirrors. In an age where we feverishly archive every thought online, desperate to be remembered, the Maya whisper a radical question. What if true wisdom isn't in lasting forever, but knowing when to let go? The Olmecs didn't just vanish, they buried their legacy with their own hands. Imagine stumbling upon a colossal stone head, its features weathered but unmistakably human, its gaze turned not toward the sky but into the earth. These aren't accidents of archaeology. The Olmecs, often called Mesoamerica's mother culture, carved these giant portraits of their rulers, some weighing over 20 tons, only to deliberately inter them, often face down, as if putting them to sleep. This wasn't conquest or collapse, it was a ritual, a conscious uncoupling from their own history. What kind of society does this? most ancient civilizations erect statues to proclaim their power, to shout across millennia, "We were here." But the Olmecs whispered, then silenced themselves. Their cities tell the same story. At La Ventura, pyramids weren't toppled by invaders but carefully deconstructed, stone by stone. Offerings weren't looted but arranged in cryptic patterns before being sealed under layers of clay. Even their ball courts, arenas of sacred sport, were filled in, not with rubble but with clean, almost ceremonial layers of earth. Every act feels like a careful erasure, as if they were wiping their own slate clean. The mystery deepens with what's missing, their writing. While the Maya left glyphs and the Zapotecs carved scripts, the Olmecs language remains a ghost. A handful of symbols survive, engraved on jade celts or pottery shards, but no royal decrees, no epic poems. Some archaeologists argue they simply hadn't developed full writing yet. Others suspect something more deliberate. The few symbols we do find often appear on objects meant to decay or be buried, like the jade figurines placed in bogs, where water would eventually reclaim them. It's as if they encoded their knowledge in perishable mediums, ensuring it would dissolve with time. Then there's the heads themselves, carved from basalt hauled from miles away. These monoliths should have been declarations of permanence. Yet their burial feels like a contradiction, a labor of love followed by a ritual of abandonment. One theory suggests they weren't hiding the heads but returning them. In Olmec cosmology, the Earth wasn't just a grave but a womb. By burying their icons, they might have been completing a cycle, sending their rulers' spirits back to the source. Another possibility, these weren't acts of humility but of protection. In Mesoamerican belief, images held power. A defaced statue couldn't be used against you. By killing their own icons, the Olmecs may have been safeguarding their essence from misuse. The most haunting clue lies in their timing. The Olmec decline coincides with climatic shifts, rising waters, changing river courses. But their response wasn't to fight or flee, it was to fold. Unlike later cultures that built higher walls or dug deeper wells, the Olmecs seem to have embraced their own unraveling. Their final acts weren't of desperation but precision. Altars broken along fault lines, monuments buried at precise celestial alignments. Even their trade routes, once sprawling across Mesoamerica, were quietly abandoned like veins retracting. What did they know that we don't? Maybe the answer isn't in what they left behind, but in what they refused to. In a world obsessed with legacy, the Olmecs pose a radical question. Is survival the only measure of success? Their ruins suggest another path, one where letting go isn't defeat, but the ultimate act of control. They built to remember, then buried to forget. And in that paradox, they achieved something rare, a mystery that outlasts its makers, not because they failed to preserve it, but because they chose not to. The greatest libraries in history didn't always fall to invaders or accidents. Sometimes they were lit from within. Take the legendary burning of the Maya codices by Spanish friars in the 16th century. But here's the twist. Long before outsiders arrived, the Maya themselves were already experts in selective destruction. Their bark paper books, painted with vibrant glyphs, weren't just repositories of knowledge. They were living entities, some designed to decay. In the sacred text known as the Popol Vuh, there's a haunting passage describing how the gods gave humans writing, then warned that certain truths must return to the shadows when their time had passed. This wasn't superstition, it was protocol. The Aztecs took this further. When Spanish chroniclers asked why so few pre-conquest books survived, Nahua elders spoke of a ritual called Tilacia Loni, the burning of the mirrors. Certain codices, they claimed, were deliberately set ablaze by their own scribes to prevent apocalyptic knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. One surviving fragment, the Codex Borgia, shows a deity swallowing a scroll, its ink dissolving into his throat. Was this a metaphor for secrets too potent to be written? Or a literal recipe for self-erasing ink? Modern chemists have analyzed Mesoamerican pigments and found some containing reactive compounds that fade when exposed to air or moisture. A message written today could vanish by tomorrow. Alchemists in medieval Europe whispered of similar mysteries. The Emerald Tablet, a foundational text of Hermeticism, supposedly crumbled to dust after its secrets were decoded. Arabic manuscripts describe breathing books whose pages turned blank if read aloud without proper initiation. Even the library of Alexandria's infamous fire hides a lesser-known truth. Some scholars argue its final blaze was set not by Julius Caesar's troops but by its own caretakers, who feared certain scrolls would unmake the world if opened. This obsession with perishable knowledge raises a startling possibility. What if these civilizations encoded their greatest truths not in books but in stone? The Maya's sacred geometry offers clues. At Chichén Itzá, the El Castillo pyramid isn't just a temple, it's a mathematical cipher. During the equinoxes, sunlight slithers down the stairs, forming a serpent of shadow that slinks toward the earth. But hidden beneath its precise angles lies another layer, acoustic engineering. Clap your hands at the pyramid's base, and the sound returns as the chirp of the sacred Quetzal bird. These aren't just artistic flourishes, they're interactive knowledge, designed to reveal itself only under exact conditions. The Olmecs took this further with their floating ball courts arenas built over underground resonating chambers that amplify specific frequencies. Play the right game with the right steps, and the court itself becomes an instrument, vibrating with harmonic patterns modern physicists are only beginning to understand. It's as if these cultures distilled their wisdom into architecture, creating libraries that couldn't burn because they weren't made of parchment, but of perception. A truth hidden in the echo of a footstep, the angle of a shadow, the silent language of geometry waiting for the worthy to listen. Perhaps this explains why so few codices survived. The real library wasn't on the shelves, it was in the stones, the stars, the very design of their world. A knowledge system so resilient it could outlast fire because its carriers weren't books but the land itself. When the last Maya scribe burned his codex, maybe he wasn't surrendering to oblivion. Maybe he was passing the torch not to us but to the earth, the sky, the silent geometry that still whispers to those who know how to hear. Stand at the heart of Teotihuacan's Avenue of the Dead, and you'll notice something unsettling about the pyramids flanking it. Their decline feels calculated. The Pyramid of the Sun doesn't just crumble, its erosion follows a precise spiral, like a nautilus shell unwinding in reverse. Archaeoastronomers have long celebrated how these structures align with solstices and planetary cycles, but there's another layer hidden in their geometry. The angles of collapse mirror sacred ratios found in nature, the Fibonacci sequence, the logarithmic curves of galaxies. It's as if the builders embedded a countdown into the stone, a blueprint for how their creations should return to the earth. Now shift your gaze to India's Brihadiswara temple, where corridors lined with deities seem to disappear when viewed from the main altar. Early explorers dismissed this as trickery, but laser scans reveal something astonishing. The vanishing halls aren't optical illusions, they're engineered voids. The pillars are spaced at intervals that cancel out sound waves at specific frequencies, creating pockets of silence. Step into one and the carvings dissolve into smooth walls. This isn't decorative, it's functional. Ancient texts refer to these spaces as Bhuvana Akasha, worlds within emptiness, designed to amplify certain vibrations while nullifying others. So why would cultures separated by oceans and millennia share this obsession with self-erasing designs? The answer might lie in a lost understanding of energy. Modern physicists recognize that all matter vibrates at quantum levels, even stone. The Maya spoke of it, the life force flowing through everything, while Hindu sages described prana channeled by temple geometry. What if these ruins weren't just buildings but resonant chambers? Teotihuacan's pyramids sit atop a grid of underground tunnels filled with liquid mercury, a conductor of energy. India's temples often rest atop intersecting groundwater streams, creating natural electromagnetic fields. The most compelling evidence comes from the materials themselves. At Bosnia's controversial Visoko complex, researchers found that the so-called pyramid layers contain engineered concrete with piezoelectric properties. It generates electric charge under pressure. Similarly, the quartz-rich sandstone of Angkor Wat's towers vibrates at frequencies that match human brainwaves when struck by dawn light. These aren't coincidences, they're signatures. Perhaps these civilizations mastered a science we're only rediscovering, that architecture can be a temporal art. Like a musician composing a piece that fades as it's played, they built structures meant to unravel in harmony with natural forces. Their legacy isn't in what still stands, but in the precision of what fell and why. The stones whisper a radical idea, that true permanence isn't about resisting time, but dancing with it. The Great Pyramid's summit isn't just missing its capstone, it's missing it perfectly. The flat platform at its peak isn't rough or broken. It's precisely leveled, as if the final piece was always meant to be temporary. Alternative researchers point to this as a clue. What if the pyramid wasn't a tomb, but a machine? Ancient texts from multiple cultures describe peak stones that hummed or glowed, and the pyramid's inner chambers resonate at frequencies matching Earth's natural vibrations. When the capstone was present, could it have acted like a tuning fork, channeling energy upward until, like a battery reaching full charge, it was designed to release? This idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Across the world, ruins share eerie similarities in their failures. Cambodia's Angkor Wat has towers lined with iron rods that show signs of extreme heat, not from fire, but possibly electrical discharge. In Egypt's Temple of Hathor, hieroglyphs depict what look like elongated light bulbs, their filaments coiled in precise spirals. Even more striking are the Baghdad batteries, clay jars from 2,000 years ago containing copper cylinders and iron rods that, when filled with citrus juice, produce measurable voltage. These aren't just curiosities, they're fingerprints of a forgotten science. Then there are the crystal skulls. Legends from the Maya to the Tibetans speak of artifacts carved from single quartz blocks, capable of projecting images or emitting sound until they shattered. Modern engineers confirm that quartz is piezoelectric. It generates electricity under pressure. A skull tuned to the right frequency might indeed sing before fracturing. Its destruction not an accident but the culmination of its purpose. The Hopi prophecy of the Fifth World describes ancestors who passed through the gateway using vibrating crystals, leaving behind only hollowed-out cities. Could these ruins be the spent husks of such rituals? The most compelling evidence lies in the ruins themselves. Göbekli Tepe's pillars, buried under thousands of tons of earth, align with geomagnetic ley lines. Bolivia's Pumapunku features stone blocks cut with such precision that they interlock without mortar, yet their surfaces show microscopic striations matching vibrational wear. And at China's White Pyramid, explorers in the 1940s reported a crystalline sphere at its apex that crumbled to dust when touched. These aren't just monuments, they're devices. Their disintegration mirrors how we discard spent batteries, their energy expended. But if these sites were power sources, what were they powering? The answer might lie in the ground. From Turkey's Derinkuyu to Peru's Sacsayhuaman, subterranean tunnels stretch for miles, their walls lined with conductive metals. Some researchers propose they formed a planetary circuit with surface structures as nodes. When activated, perhaps they didn't just generate energy, they opened pathways. The Dogon's oral history describes ancestors who walked into the sky during celestial alignments, while the Maya's Popol Vuh mentions star roads made of sound. Even Plato's Atlantis, often misread as a sunken city, might describe a culture that descended rather than drowned a people who transformed their very substance. This shifts everything. If ruins were transmitters, their vanishing wasn't tragedy, it was transcendence. Like a rocket discarding stages to reach orbit, these civilizations may have shed their physical forms to step into something we're only beginning to imagine. The stones they left behind aren't gravestones but launch pads, and the most haunting question isn't why they left, but whether they're still speaking. Through the hum of pyramids, the whisper of dissolving walls, the silent pulse of a technology we've yet to fully hear. Legends of hidden worlds beneath our feet echo across cultures like whispers through a tunnel. The Hopi people still guard stories of their ancestors descending through circular kivas, not just ceremonial pits, but portals to a luminous underworld called Sipapu. Tibetan monks protect ancient maps of Shambhala, said to lie beneath the Himalayas, accessible only through caves that breathe with seasonal winds. Even Plato's description of Atlantis sinking may have been misinterpreted. His original Greek text uses a verb meaning to immerse, not necessarily to drown. Could these tales share a hidden thread, not of destruction, but of deliberate descent? Modern technology is revealing startling clues. LiDAR scans over Cambodia's Angkor Wat complex exposed a sprawling underground city dubbed Mahendraparvata. Its grid-like streets suggesting intentional design rather than natural caverns. In Turkey's Cappadocia, radar has mapped over 200 subterranean cities, some with ventilation shafts extending 300 feet down, engineering far beyond mere refuge. The most haunting discovery came in 2018, when scans beneath Mexico's Pyramid of the Moon revealed a tunnel lined with liquid mercury, mirroring descriptions in Aztec codices of rivers that flow beneath the stone skin of the earth. But why go down? The answers may lie in celestial cycles. The Hopi calendar predicts world transitions marked by migrations between surface and subsurface realms. Mayan texts describe time gates opening during planetary alignments, with certain ruins like Honduras Capon positioned above cave systems that resonate at specific frequencies. Even the Bible's oft misunderstood abyss derives from the Sumerian Abzu, a subterranean freshwater sea believed to be the source of all knowledge. The most compelling evidence comes from geology. Ancient sites worldwide cluster along tectonic fault lines, natural weak spots where the Earth's crust is thinner. The oracle at Delphi sat atop crossing fault lines that emitted ethylene gas, inducing trances. Peru's Nazca lines align with underground aquifers visible only from altitude. Perhaps these cultures weren't just building near resources, but accessing them, tapping into what modern physicists call the geophysical internet, the planet's natural energy grid. What if disappearance was never about hiding but transitioning? The Dogon people described their ancestors carrying vibrating stones that opened passages in the earth. The Maya wrote of stone sleepers who would awaken when the stars realigned. Even today, Tibetan monks chant in pitch-black caves, believing sound can reshape matter. These threads weave a startling possibility that the greatest vanishing act in history wasn't an ending but a transformation, a stepping into the very fabric of the world, leaving behind not ruins but invitations. Imagine living by a calendar where the last page isn't just an ending, it's an instruction. For cultures that built their vanishing acts into the stars, time wasn't a straight line but a spiral, returning to points where survival meant stepping off the stage. Take Göbekli Tepe, the 12,000-year-old temple buried under tons of earth just as the Younger Dryas comet is theorized to have struck. This wasn't just coincidence. The pillars are carved with scorpions and vultures, symbols of catastrophe in ancient zodiacs, as if the builders were leaving a receipt for their own apocalypse. But here's what's chilling. They didn't just predict disaster, they rehearsed for it. The Maya took this further. Their long count calendar doesn't end in 2012, it resets, like an odometer rolling over. Modern astronomers now recognize that year as a solar maximum when the sun's violent flares could have fried unshielded electronics. Coincidence, maybe. But then why did the Maya abandon their cities in waves, each exodus timed to celestial events? Palenque was emptied during a Venus eclipse, Tikal during a rare alignment of Jupiter and Saturn. Their ruins aren't just abandoned, they're synchronized, like clockwork set to stop at the same cosmic hour. This pattern echoes globally. Egypt's Sphinx gazes not at random stars, but precisely where the constellation Leo stood during the Younger Dryas. Malta's Hypogeum, a subterranean temple carved from solid rock, channels sunlight only on winter solstice, the same day ancient texts warn of the sun's breath going dark. Even Cambodia's Angkor Wat mirrors the Draco constellation as it appeared in 10,500 BCE, a date matching Plato's Atlantis narrative. These aren't just alignments, they're receipts stamped with celestial dates. The most haunting evidence lies in how these sites were closed. Göbekli Tepe's burial wasn't haphazard. The rubble forms precise layers, like a time capsule's protective shells. The Maya dismantled staircases to prevent re-entry, as if barring the door against some cyclical visitor. And at Turkey's Derinkuyu, underground cities were sealed with circular stones weighing half a ton, mechanisms that only make sense if you assume whatever's coming can't turn a doorknob. What did they know about cosmic cycles that we're still piecing together? Modern science confirms that every 12,000 years, Earth's magnetic poles wobble, solar storms intensify, and comets sweep closer, a pattern etched in ice cores and sediment layers. These cultures didn't just track time, they anticipated its teeth. Their ruins whisper that survival isn't about lasting forever, but knowing when to step into the shadows. The greatest monuments they left behind aren't the stones that remain, but the precision of their absence countdowns written in collapsing walls and buried doors, all ticking towards zero. There's a difference between ruins that whisper and ruins that scream. Some ancient sites don't just crumble, they glare. Take Cambodia's Ta Prohm, where giant silk cotton trees coil around temple walls like serpents squeezing prey. This isn't neglect, it's theater. The roots don't obscure the carvings, they frame them, as if nature itself were staging a demonstration of dominance. Walk those moss-choked corridors and you don't feel like an explorer, you feel like an intruder. The Inca took this psychological warfare to vertigo-inducing heights. High in the Andes, their so-called ghost stairs carve sheer cliff faces, narrow steps leading nowhere, dangling over drops that would turn a mountaineer's knees to water. Archaeologists have long scratched their heads over their purpose. No settlements perch at the top, no altars wait at the base, but climb one, and the answer becomes visceral. These aren't paths, they're tests, the dizzying ascent, the wind howling through cracks, the way the stone seems to shift underfoot. It's a gauntlet designed to weed out the unworthy through raw terror. Ancient architects understood something modern designers often forget. Fear lingers longer than awe. Egypt's pyramids may dazzle, but it's the curses scribbled in their tombs that haunt us. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's burial chamber in 1922, the subsequent deaths of expedition members were blamed on a mummy's curse. Skeptics call it coincidence, but the hieroglyphs don't mince words. Death shall come on swift wings to those who disturb the king's peace. Whether supernatural or psychological, the effect was the same. For decades, archaeologists hesitated to touch royal tombs. The real genius of these ruins lies in their duality. They don't just repel, they tantalize. Consider the Nazca lines, those colossal geoglyphs in Peru's desert. From the ground, they're meaningless scratches, but climb even slightly higher and the shapes emerge. A hummingbird, a spider, a killer whale. The message is clear. You're standing on a puzzle you can't solve without shifting your perspective. It's a cognitive trap, baiting explorers with just enough clarity to keep them searching, but never enough to grant full understanding. Perhaps the most chilling examples come from the Maya. At Yaxchilan, doorways are carved with figures gripping their own decapitated heads, a warning or an initiation. In Capan, staircases end abruptly at sheer walls, their final steps inscribed with glyphs that translate to "turn back." These aren't architectural flaws, they're psychological landmines. The Maya didn't just build cities, they built labyrinths for the mind, where every dead end whispers that some knowledge isn't just hidden, it's forbidden. The brilliance of these ruins isn't in their decay, but in their calculus. They trade on our deepest instincts, curiosity and fear, the twin engines of exploration. By the time you realize you're being manipulated, it's too late. You're already hooked, turning over stones for answers that may have been designed to dissolve at your touch. The greatest trick these civilizations ever pulled, making us believe their ruins were abandoned, when in truth, they're still on guard duty, standing watch over secrets we've yet to prove we deserve. We're living in the age of digital ruins, data centers stacked with servers holding billions of selfies, emails, and memes, all encoded on hard drives with lifespans shorter than a goldfish. Tech giants call this planned obsolescence, but strip away the corporate jargon and it's eerily familiar. Like the Mayas dissolving codices or the Olmecs buried heads, we're building archives meant to crumble. The difference, they chose oblivion. We're stumbling into it. Take blockchain's promise of immutable records. Even those digital ledgers rely on fragile infrastructure, server farms vulnerable to solar flares, power grids one disaster away from collapse. Our ancestors carved warnings in stone. We etch ours in silicon, knowing full well how easily it shatters. Then there's the doomsday seed vault, buried in Svalbard's permafrost. On the surface, it's a triumph of preservation, a global backup of crop diversity. But look closer. Its entrance is a stark concrete wedge jutting from the Arctic tundra, designed to withstand millennia. The architects didn't just think about climate change, they planned for societal collapse. Sound familiar? It's Göbekli Tepe's playbook rewritten for the apocalypse. Even the language mirrors the past. The vault's curators speak of dormancy periods and resurrection biology, echoing Maya glyphs that describe seeds sleeping through cosmic winters. But the most haunting parallel lies in nuclear waste markers. How do you warn future civilizations about radioactive burial sites that remain lethal for 10,000 years? The U.S. Department of Energy once convened linguists, anthropologists, and sci-fi writers to solve this. Their solution: monolithic land art, so unsettling it would repel explorers. Spiked earthworks, jagged obelisks, even genetically modified, radiation-eating plants that glow. Not warnings, but psychological barriers. It's the same logic behind Maya ball courts, booby trapped with collapsing tunnels, or Egypt's cursed tombs. The message isn't, don't raid this. It's, you'll wish you hadn't. Here's where the mirror cracks. Ancient cultures vanished with precision. their exits timed to celestial clocks. We're hurtling toward oblivion by accident, climate denial, AI unchecked, microplastics in our bloodstreams. They practiced controlled dissolution. We're flirting with chaotic collapse, yet some are learning. The long now foundation builds clocks meant to tick for 10 millennia, while archival activists etch humanity's knowledge onto nickel discs or bury it in salt mines. These aren't just projects, they're rituals, a way to wrestle back control over how we're remembered. The ruins we've explored whisper a provocative idea: disappearance isn't failure. It's strategy. When the Maya walked away from their cities, they left behind celestial calendars still accurate today. When the Olmecs buried their colossal heads, they ensured we'd debate their purpose for centuries. Their legacy isn't in what survived, but in the precision of what didn't. Now the question hangs over us: are we repeating their choices or failing to match their foresight? The difference between a vanishing act and a train wreck is intention. One is an art, the other just debris, glass skyscrapers that vanish when it rains. Bridges woven from mushrooms that melt back into the forest after decades. Welcome to the new era of architecture, where the most cutting-edge designs aren't built to last but to leave. From Tokyo to Dubai, a quiet revolution is unfolding, one that mirrors the very ruins we've been exploring. Only this time, the vanishing act isn't accidental, it's the blueprint. Take Japan's metabolist movement, born from the ashes of World War II. Architects like Kisho Kurokawa didn't just design buildings, they designed life cycles. His Nakajin capsule tower, a cluster of modular pods plugged into a central spine, was meant to be dismantled and replaced like cells in a body. The structure still stands today, not as proof of endurance, but as a relic of a philosophy we're only now catching up to. Meanwhile, in the Nevada desert, Burning Man's temporary city rises and falls in a matter of days, its temples and towers built to burn, a modern echo of the Maya's self-dismantling ball courts. But this isn't just artistic expression. Science is catching up to ancient intuition. At the University of Stuttgart, researchers have developed bioconcrete, infused with bacteria that secrete limestone when exposed to water, a material that heals its own cracks before eventually biodegrading. In Barcelona, the walls of the Media TSE building are made of ethylene tetrafluoroethylene, a polymer that becomes translucent or opaque based on sunlight, mimicking the way Olmecs structures once played with shadow and light. Even more striking are the living bricks grown from mycelium by Boston's Hi-Fi project structures that don't just decay, but compost themselves when their time is up. What's driving this shift? Climate crisis, for one. With construction accounting for nearly 40% of global carbon emissions, architects are turning to lessons from cultures that built with the planet, not against it. But there's something deeper at work, a philosophical reckoning. Firms like Snøhetta now employ Decay consultants who study how materials weather, not to prevent erosion, but to choreograph it. The Larvik Maritime Museum in Norway wears its rust like a badge of honor, its corten steel facade designed to oxidize into a protective shell, just as the Maya coated their temples in sacrificial plaster that dissolved to seal the stone beneath. Perhaps the most telling sign of this renaissance sits in London's Tate Modern. Olafur Eliasson's Ice Watch installation, 12 glacial ice blocks harvested from Greenland, sat melting in the museum's courtyard, their dripping clocks counting down to nothingness. Visitors could touch the ice, feel its cold bite, watch it vanish before their eyes. It wasn't just art, it was a resurrection of that ancient dialogue between permanence and ephemerality. The exhibit's popularity suggests we're hungry for this conversation, that after centuries of obsessing over legacy, we're ready to reconsider what truly endures. The irony is delicious. For years, archaeologists scoured ruins for secrets of longevity. Now, they're being consulted for the opposite: how to build things that know when to bow out gracefully. From Cambodia's dissolving sandstone to Germany's algae-powered biofacades, the thread connects. Whether by star charts or carbon budgets, the message remains the same. Survival isn't about resisting time, but moving with its rhythm. Those ancient civilizations may have left behind only whispers, but their greatest lesson wasn't in how they disappeared, it's that they planned to all along. And as our glass towers learn to fade and our concrete learns to breathe, we're finally starting to listen. There's a quiet rebellion simmering beneath the surface of archaeology, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about preserving the past. Picture this: a team of conservators painstakingly restoring a Mayan temple, only to learn from local elders that the crumbling facade wasn't neglect, it was intentional. The cracks were prayers in stone, the erosion part of a sacred cycle. Suddenly, every brushstroke to save the structure feels less like rescue and more like rewriting history. This ethical tightrope isn't theoretical. On Easter Island, the iconic Moai statues now standing sentinel over the coastline tell a carefully edited story. When European explorers first arrived, most lay face down, deliberately toppled by the Rapa Nui people themselves. Oral traditions speak of a cultural revolution where the islanders rejected their ancestor cult, unleashing what scholars call iconoclasm with purpose. Yet today, tourists snap selfies with re-erected Moai, unaware that their polished silhouettes overwrite a far more profound narrative, one of a society that chose to dismantle its own legacy. The conflict cuts deeper than preservation debates. For many indigenous communities, excavation isn't just disruptive, it's sacrilege. The Navajo Nation has long opposed digging up ancestral remains, believing it disturbs the skin of the earth. In Australia, Aboriginal groups describe archaeologists as bone thieves, arguing that some knowledge belongs to the land, not museums. Even high-tech solutions like digital reconstructions raise thorny questions. When researchers 3D scanned sacred Ojibwe petroglyphs in Minnesota, elders protested that capturing the images digitally violated their spiritual integrity. The essence wasn't in the carvings, but in their ephemeral dance with wind and water. Modern conservation often operates on a Western timeline, one that assumes permanence equals value. But what if we're misreading the ruins? The Maya coated their temples in bright red plaster, knowing it would flake away, embedding seeds in the mortar so plants would eventually reclaim the stones. Japan's Ai's Grand Shrine has been rebuilt identically every 20 years since the 7th century, not despite its impermanence, but because of it. These cultures weren't failing to preserve, they were succeeding at transformation. Perhaps the most provocative case comes from Turkey's Çatalhöyük, a 9,000-year-old city where archaeologists found walls painted with vibrant frescoes, then promptly covered with white plaster. For decades, this was interpreted as primitive redecorating, but microscopic analysis revealed something astonishing. The residents reapplied plaster in precise layers, timing it to celestial cycles. The paintings weren't erased, they were consecrated, their beauty offered to time itself. Modern conservators face an impossible choice: peel back the layers to reveal the art, or honor the ancient ritual of burial. This dilemma forces us to confront archaeology's unspoken bias, that seeing is understanding. We laser scan pyramids and carbon date artifacts, desperate to make the past legible. But some cultures engineered their mysteries to resist interpretation. The Olmecs buried their colossal heads face down. The Maya Bubi trapped their tombs. The builders of Göbekli Tepe entombed their temple under thousands of tons of earth. These weren't accidents, they were locks, As technology gives us godlike powers to reconstruct and preserve, we're left with a haunting question. When we restore what was meant to fade, are we rescuing history or holding it hostage? The ruins whisper that sometimes the deepest respect isn't in uncovering secrets, but letting them keep their silence. The Pantheon in Rome has stood for nearly 2,000 years, its massive dome defying gravity and time. But here's the paradox: its longevity comes from a material designed to fail. Roman concrete wasn't just durable, it was alive. When cracks form, rainwater seeps in, reacting with volcanic ash in the mix to grow new mineral fibers that stitch the gaps shut. This wasn't accidental chemistry. Ancient recipes describe precise ratios of lime, ash, and seawater, a formula that didn't just resist decay but harnessed it. Modern engineers only cracked this secret in 2023, realizing the Romans hadn't built to last forever. They'd built to last long enough. Half a world away, the Incas pulled off an even stranger trick. Their mortar wasn't glue, it was a clock. At Sacsayhuaman, zigzagging walls fit together so tightly you can't slip a credit card between the stones. Yet the binding material between them wasn't meant to endure. Mixed with organic compounds from local plants, it hardened just long enough to position the blocks, then slowly dissolved. The result: structures that shifted during earthquakes without cracking, their stones dancing frictionlessly as the mortar evaporated. Today's seismologists call it disappearing damping, a seismic safety system coded into chemistry. Then there's Puma Punku's enigma. The Andean site's so-called liquid stone appears machined, with geometric cuts sharper than modern diamond tools could achieve. But the real shock came when geologists analyzed the andesite blocks. The stone contains rare mineral chains that weaken predictably under UV exposure. Like a sandcastle programmed to collapse at high tide, these megaliths were engineered to degrade along invisible fault lines. Spanish chronicles recorded local Aymara stories about builders who taught rocks to die, suggesting this wasn't just material science, it was philosophy etched in geology. Alchemists across cultures hid clues to this art of controlled demise. The emerald tablets, famous as above, so below, axiom originally continued: as the stone rises, so must it fall. Byzantine fire recipes included saltpeter ratios that made walls combust after decades. Even Da Vinci's notebooks contained sketches for temporary bridges, woven from vines and resins that would rot on schedule. These weren't blueprints for collapse, but for precision, a symphony where every material knew its exit cue. Now imagine modern cities built with this wisdom. Skyscrapers whose steel beams oxidize into harmless rust after a century. Hospitals that biodegrade when their antibiotics seep into groundwater. Demolition crews wouldn't need wrecking balls. They'd just spray a catalyst, watching structures fold like origami in reverse. The military already experiments with self-erasing supply depots in conflict zones. Architects draft buildings seeded with fungi that digest concrete when sensors detect abandonment. We're relearning what ancient engineers knew. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't about resisting time, but conducting it. The irony: our landfills overflow with indestructible plastics while we scramble to replicate Roman self-healing concrete. Our nuclear waste sites demand markers to last 10,000 years, yet the Maya left temples that composted themselves safely. These ruins whisper that true sustainability isn't just about building things that last, it's about building things that know when to stop. Perhaps the ultimate test of a civilization isn't what it leaves behind, but how gracefully it lets go. Deep beneath Malta's sun-baked cliffs lies a secret that hums in the dark: the hypogeum's oracle chamber, where whispers spiral into echoes that linger for seconds longer than physics should allow. But this isn't just an acoustic marvel, it's a geological time bomb. Researchers testing the chamber's resonance discovered something eerie. At precisely 110 Hz, the frequency of a low male voice chanting water droplets suspended in the air disintegrate into mist. Now imagine centuries of ritual chanting in that space, the sound waves gnawing at limestone like invisible teeth. Local folklore speaks of priests who could make the stones weep, but science suggests a darker truth: they might have been making them vanish. Across the Himalayas, Tibetan monks still guard the legend of Dunkar, sounding stones, megaliths that crumble when certain mantras are sung. Modern engineers initially dismissed this as myth until they analyzed ancient temple ruins in Mustang. The stones there show unusual fracture patterns, cracks radiating from central points like spiderwebs, a telltale signature of vibrational stress. When researchers replicated the monk's throat singing techniques near similar rocks in the lab, the results were chilling. At specific harmonic frequencies, sandstone pillars developed microfissures within hours, not from brute force but from relentless, precise vibration, a slow-motion demolition conducted by sound alone. The Maya may have encoded this knowledge into their very architecture. At Chichen Itza's El Castillo Pyramid, a hand clap at the base doesn't just echo, it returns as the chirp of the sacred Quetzal bird. But climb to the top and clap again, and the sound distorts into something unsettling, a dissonant shudder that makes your bones vibrate. Acousticians mapping these frequencies found they align with the natural resonant rate of the pyramid's limestone. Prolonged exposure, say, from daily ceremonies would have created standing waves strong enough to fatigue the stone over decades. It's as if the pyramid was designed to listen to its own destruction. Even more telling are the whistling vessels of Peru's Moche culture. These ceramic bottles, shaped like deities, produce eerie tones when tilted frequencies that match seismic activity in the region. Archaeoacoustics expert Miriam Kohler demonstrated that when grouped together, the vessels create a feedback loop capable of generating infrasound, the same low-frequency vibrations known to trigger landslides. The Moche buried these instruments beneath their temples in precise configurations, almost like acoustic landmines waiting for the right ritual or the right disaster to activate them. What unites these scattered examples is a terrifying sophistication. These cultures didn't just build with stone, they composed with it, treating architecture like sheet music where every note had consequences. The implications rewrite our understanding of their abandoned ruins. When the hypogeum's ceilings show erosion patterns matching resonance hotspots, or when Capon's staircases fracture along harmonic nodal lines, we're not seeing neglect, we're witnessing the final measures of a symphony written in seismic shifts and dissolving limestone. Their vanishing acts weren't passive surrenders to time, they were encores. Climate doesn't just shape ruins, it collaborates with them. In Cambodia's Angkor complex, strangler figs sink their roots into sandstone like living crowbars, prying apart temples block by block. But here's the twist the builders knew. They mixed their mortar with organic resins that accelerated erosion where it suited them, creating deliberate weak points for nature to exploit. Those iconic tree-topped ruins aren't accidents of neglect. They're choreographed dissolutions, a slow dance between stone and vine timed over centuries. Meanwhile, in Iraq's baked plains, the ziggurats of Ur tell a different story of conspiracy with the elements. Their sun-dried bricks were laced with salt harvested from evaporated marshes, a recipe for self-destruction. When rare rains come, the salt crystals swell, pulverizing the bricks from within like microscopic time bombs. Yet cuneiform tablets describe construction rituals where priests anointed bricks with brine, chanting incantations to return the mountain to the waters. This wasn't poor engineering, it was sacred geology embedding decay into the blueprint. The Nazca lines reveal an even bolder gamble with nature. These colossal desert etchings survive precisely because the region's hyper-arid climate preserves them. A single shift in wind patterns would erase them in decades. But Nazca engineers didn't just rely on stable weather. They engineered fail-safes. Recent drone surveys reveal hidden channels beneath the glyphs that funnel groundwater away, creating a parched microclimate. The lines don't just sit on the desert, they command it, locking their fragile existence to an environmental trigger. This synergy between architecture and ecology reaches its peak in Peru's cloud forests, where the Chachapoya built cliffside mausoleums in perpetual mist. The structure's limestone facades absorb moisture, growing moss that secretes acids to erode decorative friezes on schedule. Local legends speak of houses that melt like sugar, suggesting the builders viewed erosion not as decay, but as metamorphosis. Modern scans confirm their tombs were stocked with fungi-rich soils that accelerate decomposition, nature's accomplices in a carefully paced, disappearing act. The lesson hidden in these ruins isn't about fragility, it's about control. These cultures didn't fight their environments, they weaponized them. Like a composer writing sheet music for the wind and rain, they orchestrated collapse with the same precision others reserved for preservation. Their ruins whisper a radical truth. Sometimes survival means knowing how to surrender, not to time's chaos but to its rhythm. Water doesn't just destroy, it edits. Across countless myths, floods aren't mere disasters. They're narrative devices wielded like celestial scalpels to excise entire civilizations from history's page. The biblical deluge didn't just punish, it purified, resetting the world's ledger. Sumerian cuneiform tablets describe the god Enlil sending waters to cleanse the earth of noise, washing away cities like scribbles on a slate. But what if these stories aren't just metaphors? Modern marine archaeology reveals ruins that challenge our assumptions. Off the coast of Gujarat, the submerged city of Dwarka's walls don't crumble randomly, they fracture in geometric patterns, as if the stones were designed to split along hidden fault lines when the tide turned. The evidence grows stranger beneath Cuba's waves. Sonar scans show pyramidal structures half a mile down, their edges too precise for natural formations. Yet the surrounding seafloor lacks the sediment layers expected from a sudden cataclysm. Instead, the site resembles a city that sank slowly, almost deliberately, like a ship scuttled by its own crew. This aligns with Maya creation myths describing previous worlds that softened into the sea when their time was done. Even Plato's Atlantis, often dismissed as fiction, takes on new dimensions when read closely. His text specifies the island didn't just drown, it descended, as if following some submerged protocol. Then there's the enigma of Yonaguni. Japan's underwater monoliths feature terraces and staircases carved from bedrock, but the most telling detail is their positioning. The structures align with ancient sea levels from 12,000 years ago, yet show erosion patterns suggesting they spent centuries submerged before fully vanishing. This wasn't a single catastrophic flood, but a phased retreat architecture in dialogue with the ocean's rise. Local legends speak of a land called Mu whose priests called the waves to their doorsteps, weaving rituals around lunar cycles that govern tide. The mechanics of these engineered drownings reveal chilling sophistication. At India's Gulf of Combat, dredging brought up pottery shards layered with marine fossils, proof the area flooded multiple times, with cities rebuilt between each inundation. These weren't people fleeing disaster, but participants in a cyclical pact with the sea. Similarly, Malta's Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a labyrinthine temple carved underground, contains reservoirs that flood certain chambers during solstices. The acoustics in these rooms amplify water's sound to deafening volumes. suggesting rituals where priests didn't just predict floods, but conducted them like symphonies. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in what these cultures didn't salvage. When excavators probed Dwarka's ruins, they found intact pottery stacked in kitchens, jewelry left on altars, precious objects abandoned without panic. Contrast this with Pompeii, where victims clutched valuables in their final moments. The difference is stark, one a tragedy, the other a ceremony. The Mahabharata's description of Dwarka's fall captures this dissonance perfectly. The sea rose to embrace the city, and the people walked into the waves as if keeping an appointment. This shifts how we read flood myths entirely. Water wasn't just an eraser, it was an archivist. By dissolving certain materials while preserving others, stone lasts, wood floats, metal sinks, these cultures curated what future explorers would find. Like a painter choosing solvents to reveal hidden layers, they used floods not to destroy, but to redact. The real message of these ruins isn't in what the water took, but in what it was instructed to leave behind. There's a difference between leaving a message and designing it to arrive on schedule. Newgrange, Ireland's 5,000-year-old tomb doesn't just face the winter solstice sun, it conducts it. At dawn on the shortest day of the year, a razor-thin beam of light creeps through a roof box above the entrance, sliding down a 60-foot passage to illuminate the inner chamber for precisely 17 minutes. This isn't just celestial alignment, it's precision engineering with a deadline. The builders didn't merely mark the solstice, they encoded it into stone, creating a clock that ticks once a year, every year across 50 centuries. But here's what chills the bones. The lightbox wasn't just a calendar, it was a fail-safe. If the passage collapsed or filled with debris, the angle of the roof box would still cast shadows in predictable patterns on the walls, a backup system to preserve the message. The Great Pyramid's so-called air shafts tell a similar story of celestial-fed X. Long dismissed as ventilation channels, these narrow tunnels align with specific stars, not as they appear today, but as they shone in 2500 BCE. The southern shaft in the king's chamber points directly to Orion's belt at its zenith during that epoch, while the northern one targets Theban, the pole star of the pharaohs. Egyptologists once assumed this was about guiding royal souls to the heavens, but astrophysicists like Kate Spence note something stranger. The alignment was only perfect for about 50 years around the pyramid's construction date. After that precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis would have gradually misaligned the shafts. It's as if the builders stamped their work with a cosmic timestamp, ensuring future scholars could carbon date the structure using the stars themselves. This obsession with timed communication reaches its peak in Mexico's Chichén Itzá. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight slithers down El Castillo's staircase, forming a serpent of shadow that connects with a stone head at the base. Tourists flock to see this spectacle, but few notice the hidden counterpoint. On the same dates, the western face of the pyramid remains in perfect shadow all day. The effect isn't just visual, it's mathematical. The number of steps, the angle of descent, even the play of light and dark all encode the Maya-long count calendar's mechanics. It's less a temple than a stone-bound instruction manual, waiting for a culture advanced enough to read it. What unites these sites is their built-in obsolescence. Unlike monuments meant to awe forever, these ruins were designed to reveal themselves in stages. Take Göbekli Tepe's buried pillars, which only show their full carvings when viewed under the solstice sun at particular times of day. Or the Nazca lines, invisible from ground level but forming coherent shapes when seen from specific vantage points at certain hours. These aren't just clever tricks, they're access protocols, ensuring the message wouldn't be legible until the recipient possessed the right perspective, both literally and intellectually. The most tantalizing possibility, some of these time capsules may still be sealed. In 2018, scans revealed a hidden void above the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid, its purpose unknown. Meanwhile, beneath Newgrange's floor, ground-penetrating radar has detected uncharted chambers arranged in a spiral pattern matching the solstice light's path. These could be waiting rooms in history's post office, holding parcels stamped, "Deliver when humanity is ready." Perhaps this explains why so many vanishing cultures left behind just enough to intrigue, but never enough to fully comprehend. Their ruins weren't abandoned, they were set to snooze, programmed to awaken when the stars realigned or the calendar turned. We're left with a spine-tingling thought. What if the greatest archaeological discoveries aren't behind us, but ahead, ticking quietly in the dark until their moment arrives? The real question isn't whether these civilizations were speaking to the future, it's whether we're finally learning how to listen. It starts with a whisper in the dark, a chill down the spine when no wind blows. Howard Carter's team swore they heard faint chanting the moment they breached Tutankhamun's tomb, though the chamber had been sealed for millennia. Within years, half the excavation party was dead, not from curses carved on walls, but from bizarre twists of fate. A mosquito bite gone septic, a slip on wet pavement, a sudden fever with no known cause. Meanwhile, Hiram Bingham, the Yale professor who discovered Machu Picchu, lost his fortune overnight when creditors called in loans he didn't know existed. These aren't just spooky campfire tales, they're patterns etched into the very stone of these sites, as if the ruins themselves exert a gravitational pull on misfortune. Local lore often warns of guardians, spirits woven into the architecture. The Quechua speak of apus, mountain spirits who demand offerings before allowing passage to sacred sites. In Egypt, villagers still avoid the Valley of the Kings after sunset, murmuring about Afarit, invisible sentinels that twist luck like thread. But modern explorers are starting to document something stranger than superstition. At Turkey's Derinkuyu underground city, EMF meters spike in certain tunnels despite no detectable power source, while team members report vertigo and nausea. In Cambodia's Beng Melia, drones malfunction over specific courtyards, their cameras glitching to show shadowy figures that vanish when investigators arrive on foot. The psychological toll is measurable. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science analyzed heart rates and cortisol levels in visitors to cursed sites versus neutral ruins. At locations like Scotland's Clover Cairns or Mexico's Temple of the Feathered Serpent, subjects showed stress markers 50% higher, not from fear of legends but from subliminal triggers. The architecture itself seems weaponized. Infrasound from wind through narrow passages, flickering shadows engineered by precise stone angles, even latent molds in sealed chambers that release psychoactive compounds when disturbed. Perhaps the most chilling example lies in Bolivia's Puma Punku. After a German team laser-scanned the andesite blocks in 2012, their lead researcher developed a rare neurological condition that made him perceive time in reverse. He described watching his own hands unwrite reports, his memories unraveling like yarn. Doctors found no physical cause. Local Aymara guides nodded knowingly, explaining the ruins were Siachamakoni, places that unmake understanding. This raises an uncomfortable question. Are these phenomena accidents of decay or features? The Maya word Wayob translates to both guardian spirit and sleeping architecture, suggesting they viewed buildings as dormant intelligences. At Göbekli Tepe, the T-shaped pillars aren't just carvings, they're portraits of specific individuals, their mouths slightly open as if mid-whisper. When acoustic engineers modeled the site, they discovered the pillars channel sound into a low-frequency hum at dawn, a vibration known to induce trance states. Whether by design or emergent property, these ruins share a haunting trait. They resist being known. The more meticulously they're studied, the more they unravel the observer. Satellite imagery blurs over certain Mexican pyramids. Thermal cameras show cold spots in sealed chambers where physics says none should exist. Even digital backups of excavation data corrupt at higher rates than normal, a statistical anomaly noted in multiple studies. It's as if the stones enforce their own embargo on revelation. So when a Shuar elder in Ecuador warns that some ruins are not houses but traps, or when Navajo guides refuse to enter Choco Canyon's kivas after dark, maybe they're not being mystical. Maybe they're the only ones who truly understood the rules. These aren't just relics of the past, they're active participants in a dialogue we're only beginning to decode. And their first lesson is clear: not all doors are meant to be opened. Some thresholds exist to teach us when to turn back. Governments and corporations have become the new architects of vanishing acts, winking at history while shredding its paper trail. The CIA's standard document retention policy reads like a recipe for deliberate amnesia: classified files systematically destroyed after set periods, not by neglect but protocol. Meanwhile, Silicon Valley's ephemeral apps promise messages that disappear like footprints in the surf, a marketing spin that would make the Olmecs nod in recognition. The parallels run deeper than coincidence. Ancient cultures buried their secrets under layers of earth. Today's power brokers encrypt theirs behind layers of code. Both share the same unspoken motto: some truths are too volatile for daylight. Consider the Templeton Foundation's controversial grants funding research into memory-erasing technology. Scientists now experiment with drugs that can selectively scrub traumatic recollections, a modern twist on the Mayas' ritual use of psychedelics to reset the mind. Their sacred Tiahuanacoatl mushrooms weren't just spiritual tools, they were cognitive editors, helping priests forget forbidden knowledge after ceremonies. Today's neurochemical manipulations aim for similar ends, just with fewer visions of serpent gods. The goal remains unchanged: control over what lingers in the collective memory. Even urban planning has joined the disappearing act. Beijing's ghost cities, entire metropolises built then left vacant, aren't failed developments but strategic reserves. They're empty boulevards awaiting future crises. Dubai's artificial islands erode by design, their shorelines engineered to retreat gracefully as sea levels rise. These aren't miscalculations, they're modern ziggurats, altars to impermanence. The most telling example lies in Norway's Svalbard Global Seed Vault, where steel doors hiss open to reveal a cathedral of biodiversity carved into Arctic permafrost. Its entrance, crowned with prismatic steel artwork reflecting polar light, feels less like a bunker and more like a beacon, an intentional landmark for some future civilization's archaeologists. The digital realm takes this further. Blockchains, immutable ledgers promise eternal records, yet the servers hosting them cluster in bunkers vulnerable to solar flares. Cloud storage giants boast about redundancy, but their data centers float on barges in international waters, jurisdictional no-man's lands where information can be legally scuttled. Even Wikipedia, the supposed library of Alexandria 2.0, has seen entire entries vanish overnight due to edit wars and ideological scrubbing. Knowledge has never been more abundant nor more fragile. What separates these modern vanishing acts from ancient ones is intentionality. When the Maya dismantled their cities, they left glyphs hinting at cosmic cycles. When the CIA degausses a hard drive, the only glyph is a classified stamp. One was a dialogue with time, the other a silencing. Yet the thread connects. From priests burying jade masks to Texios subpoena-proofing emails, the elite have always known that true power lies not in what you preserve, but in what you choose to erase. The ruins of tomorrow won't be stumbled upon in jungles. They're being constructed right now in boardrooms and black sites, waiting for the clock to run out on their relevance. The real question isn't whether we're repeating history, but whether we've lost the wisdom to vanish beautifully. The universe should be teeming with life, mathematically speaking. With billions of habitable planets in our galaxy alone, the silence out there is deafening. This is the Fermi paradox, the unsettling gap between how many civilizations should exist and how many we've actually found. But what if the answer isn't about aliens avoiding us, but about them vanishing before we could ever meet? The ruins we've been exploring whisper a terrifying possibility. Advanced societies might not destroy themselves, they might erase themselves. Enter the Great Filter, the idea that some invisible hurdle stops civilizations from reaching the stars. Traditionally, scientists assumed this filter was nuclear war or environmental collapse. But ancient ruins suggest another option. The filter isn't death, it's disappearance. The Maya didn't just abandon their cities, they dismantled them with surgical precision. The Olmecs buried their greatest works alive. These weren't acts of desperation, they were protocols. If intelligence inevitably attracts danger, whether from rivals, resource depletion, or even its own inventions, then the ultimate survival tactic isn't to endure but to dissolve. Consider the timing. Göbekli Tepe was buried just as the last ice age ended, a period of catastrophic climate shifts. The Indus Valley cities emptied as monsoons faltered. These cultures didn't just adapt to change, they anticipated it, folding their hand before the game turned against them. Modern astronomers call this purging the light curve, the moment a civilization stops emitting detectable signals. Ancient engineers might have called it common sense. The implications ripple outward. If vanishing is a survival strategy, then the cosmos could be littered with ghost civilizations, their ruins camouflaged as natural formations. Our telescopes search for radio signals, but what if the truly advanced don't broadcast, they bury, they encrypt, they let their cities melt back into the jungle like the Khmer temples of Cambodia, their knowledge hidden not in libraries but in the very landscape. The Dogon people of Mali tell of ancestors who returned to the stars by walking into mirrors. Could this be more than myth? Could it be a user manual? This flips the Fermi paradox on its head. The silence isn't evidence of failure, it might be evidence of success. The ruins we've stumbled upon aren't graveyards, they're training wheels. Earth's vanishing acts could be dress rehearsals for a universal truth, that the only way to outlast time is to leave no trace at all. The Maya's collapsing temples and the Olmecs' buried heads aren't just archaeological curiosities. Their trial runs for humanity's final exam, a test we're still failing, because right now we're doing the opposite of what they did. We're shouting into the void, stamping our names on everything, desperate to be remembered. But the ruins whisper a different lesson. Sometimes survival looks like silence.